All right, everybody. Today we are going to be talking about rewriting equations and formulas. So, the first thing you're going to do is let's do the let's review. There is a problem. Remember, the test is next week, so there's a problem very similar to that on the test. It says a quadrilateral has four sides and angles. Okay. The sum, now remember when we say the word sum, we're already thinking addition of the measure of the angles. So then they want me to add the angles. And then they said your answer is going to be 360. All right, well, let's do exactly what they said. So I'm going to write an equation. So we're going to write an equation. And it says, let's see, x plus 100 plus the other angle's 80 plus the 60. And remember, it's supposed to equal 360 degrees. All right, now I understand the numbers can get a little bit big and we're not using calculators yet. But remember, we're going to join all the numbers together anyways. So here's what we can do. I'll write the 100, I'll write the 80, and then I'll write the 60 for now. And I'm going to add them up. So 0 plus 0 plus 0 is 0. All right, and then we're going to add 8 and 6. Well, 8 plus 6, of course, is 14. But I get to put a 1 up here. And then 1 plus 1 is 2. So we went very old school with our addition. But look, the idea is, remember, you have to combine like terms. So you do have a question like this on the test. And it says x plus, remember the combination of all of that was 240. And we still have that equals 360. And now that this is just a very generic equation that we're going to solve as usual, remember, how do I get rid of addition? Well, we have to think the opposite operation. So the inverse would be subtraction by 240. So I'm going to subtract 240. All right, and then just like that, here we go. X is equal to 0 minus 0 is 0. 6 minus 4 is 2. 3 minus 2 is just a 1. And so we have found that missing angle. So this angle right here is actually 120 degrees is what we found. Now, again, this question, very similar to it, will be on the test. So we just have to remember, let's set it up. And then very carefully, look, even if you have to go old school, work out that calculation. Now, today's topic is actually something that we've already worked with. They're called rewriting literal equations. So the question is, well, what's a literal equation? Like I said, you've already worked with these, but it's here again. And so a literal equation says, it is an equation, so I'll make sure to give you time to write it all out, an equation that has two or more variables, so letters, right? So it's going to have more than one letter. It's going to have two or more. It's called a literal equation. And we've actually already solved them before. So today we're just doing a little more practice with that. Now, just remember to rewrite them. So to rewrite, all you have to do to rewrite a literal equation all you have to do is solve. So you're going to take everything that we've learned so far in these 3 weeks, right? You're going to solve for one variable. So you're going to take all the patterns we've seen for solving. You can use your word wall. Remember to do this in terms of the other variables. So basically what they're saying is just get the letter by itself that they ask you for, and your answer is going to have letters in it. And that's okay. We've had those type of problems before. So here we're going to do a couple because this is review of something we've already done. So I'm going to get my highlighter ready, of course. Just give you a moment to catch up with the writing. But again, the goal is get the letter by itself. And we've done that plenty of times already throughout these 3 weeks. So when I look at equation or example number 1, it says solve the literal equation. You're going to solve it for the letter y. That's my goal. I want to get the letter y all by itself. All right, well, let me get my line down the equals. And now my goal is get the y by itself. Well, the pattern that we've been learning for solving says you don't get rid of the 3 first. We always get rid of adding and subtracting first. So then I'm going to subtract the 4x to the other side. And notice I did kind of push it to the side a little bit, because if you think about it, can you actually subtract a 9 and a 4x? Yeah, you can't. They are not common terms, so you can't combine them. But what we do and what we learned last time was that when you're solving something like this, the way you read it is the way you write it. So look, if I just read what it says 9 minus 4x. Well, then that's exactly what I'm going to write. 9 minus 4x. Now, we don't worry about this side. They're going to look interesting, we'll say, because remember, we said our answers are going to have letters in them. So now they said, all right, well, I still want to get y by itself. And the only way to get y by itself, you see, now they're right next to each other, which means I put a dot right in the center. They are multiplying. And the opposite of multiplication, only division works. But remember, we are dividing everybody by 3. So we like to give it to every single part first. All right, so the 3's are gone. Remember, that's the whole point. And finally, my letter y is by itself. And that was the ultimate goal, getting that y by itself. So we don't care how weird it's going to look over here. This is my ultimate goal. All right, well, now let's see. Can 9 be divided by 3? Absolutely. Just a 3. Minus, can 4 be divided by 3? Yeah, that one doesn't really work. But remember, we said it's okay to just leave your answer as a fraction. And don't forget, you do need to make sure that you write the x right next to it. But there it is. We're done. You do the math you can, and if you can't do anything with it, then just leave it alone. This is how we solve little equations where we're going to have answers that have letters in them. That's what they were trying to tell us up here. So we look at letter B now. When I look at letter B, they said solve the little equation, and my goal is to get the letter x all by itself. All right. So my goal is that one. That's what I want to get by itself. That means I need to get rid of everybody else. But remember, I'm getting rid of everybody else. That's on this side. So I'm going to get rid of that B. I'm going to get rid of the 5z. Remember, they're together anyways. But just don't forget the patterns we've been learning. What would be the first thing we have to get rid of on this side? And if you're thinking the 5z, you're right. Remember, you have to get rid of adding and subtracting first. That's been the pattern for the 3 weeks. So the opposite of adding is subtracting. So I'm going to subtract the 5z, subtract the 5z. All right, so then cross it out and look. Don't overthink it. Look at what we have left on this side. I have a b and an x. Over here, can I actually combine these two and call it yz? Absolutely not. Remember, they're different letters. They cannot be combined. So then it says y minus 5z. Well, and that's exactly what I'm going to write down. Y minus 5z. And there comes my equal sign. Don't overthink it. We're just, you know, your goal is to get this letter all by itself. That's the only thing you have to worry about. So, looking at it carefully, yes, they're right next to each other, so we put a little dot in the center. That reminds us that they're multiplying, and the only way to get rid of multiplication, well, division. Now, in this one, I'm dividing by a letter, so instead of giving it to each one individually, which, by the way, you can still do that, but it's a letter. You're not going to be able to divide them by b anyways, so you do have the option of just leaving it the way it is, which would be, look, the b's are gone. There it is. That was my goal, get x by itself. And if you can't do any math, and you can't because they're all different letters, then the way you see it is the way you write it, or the way you read it, y minus 5z divided by b. The way you read it is the way you write it. This is how we solve our literal equations. All right, so now those are the first two that we have here. And you know what? Let's just get the practice in. So let's do it together, because I understand that these are a little bit different, a little strange. And then that way you can just attack the homework for today right after. It is on BIM, keep that in mind. So, solve the literal equation. We're going to solve for the letter y. All right, so here we go. I want to get the y by itself, very similar to the one on top. But again, you can't start with the 4. The 4 is directly next to the letter, so that's the last one we get rid of. So I'm going to get rid of the 8x. And don't forget, you don't look at this plus sign. It's a positive, so it's a plus 8x. Well, then the opposite of a plus 8x is to subtract an 8x. And again, if you're thinking, oh, so I have to subtract 20 and 8. No, no, no. This one doesn't have an x, so there you can't combine like terms there. But all I'm going to do is I'm going to read it, 20 minus 8x, and I'm going to write it because I cannot do any math with it. And then over here, what do I have? Well, 4y. And my goal is still to get this y by itself, but don't forget, remember the patterns. They're right next to each other, so put a dot between them. That means they are multiplying. Then I need to divide everybody. Now, these are numbers. That's why I'm doing it this way. See, last time up here, I didn't do that because it was a letter. But here they're numbers. So there is some work that I could probably do. So the y is gone. But here it is. Look. Sorry, the 4 is gone. So y equals, all right, remember, it's just division. 20 divided by 4. There's my 5. Minus 8 divided by 4. Well, that's just 2. And then don't forget, that x was still patiently waiting. You still have to make sure you keep writing it down. But again, these are literal equations because they had 2 letters in them at least. And then when you look at this one, man, look at that one. 1, 2, 3, 4 letters involved. Well, it doesn't change the way I'm going to do the problem. My goal is I have to get the x by itself. That's why I like highlighting it. It reminds me of what side I should look at because there's so many other letters. Let me get my line down, the equals, of course. So remember, 5z, we don't care about. My goal is get rid of the y and get rid of the a. But again, the pattern. For 3 weeks, we've been working on these solving patterns. Pattern number 1 says, get rid of adding and subtracting first. So I'm going to add the y to both sides. That gets rid of the subtraction. I still have ax is equal to. Remember, you cannot call it zy. It has a plus sign, so read it. 5z plus y. 5z plus y. There it is. Ultimate goal, we were trying to get this by itself. So if we're trying to get this by itself, there's only one last thing I have to do. And again, look, the patterns, don't forget. They are right next to each other. Only division. Now, this time it's a letter. So a letter, I'm not going to be able to do any math. So I can just give it to both. Again, if you do it individually, that's fine too. It would be the correct answer. So then, x, because the a's are gone, is equal to, and again, you can't do any math, so the way you see it is the way you rewrite it. 5z plus y, big fraction, with an a at the bottom. So, take a moment to catch up with the writing there. But the idea, again, the ultimate goal is use all the patterns we've talked about to get the letter that we want by itself. Now remember, we have one more page of notes for the week here. So flip the page once you're ready. Now, last idea for the unit. Because after this, remember, next week, test time. So we need to be ready. Make sure we're caught up with all the work that we have to do. All right, so we're going to talk about formulas. Obviously, math uses a lot of formulas. Wait till you get to geometry. Man, you're going to see formulas left and right there. So let's start off with the idea of a formula. So a formula shows how one variable is related to one or more other variables. All right, give you a moment here. So again, a formula is basically describing a relationship between letters. Okay? So one thing you should note is this. A formula is a type of literal equation, because a formula is made up, it's basically an equation with a bunch of letters. So that's why we can call it a literal equation. Most of the time, if they give me a formula, we'll just plug in, but sometimes it might help to get a letter by itself before we plug in. So now we're going to talk about some basic formulas that you may remember from your middle school days. So let's see if any of these sound familiar to you. We're going to see some on the homework. We're going to see some right now with the last two examples. So, common formulas. The very first formula that we see a lot in math is the area of a rectangle. So I'm just going to write area of rectangle. And the area of a rectangle says area is equal to length times width. So basically for the area of a rectangle, you're going to multiply two numbers. And you're going to see that in a little bit with the problem we're going to do. Now, another classic equation from your past, see, the area of a circle. Area of a, and I'm going to do the geometry way of saying circle, which is literally a circle with a dot in the center. So the area of a circle says area is equal to pi radius squared. So the radius is what half a circle is right there. That's the radius. But we gave it a power of 2. And then, of course, pi is a very famous number. People celebrate that on March 14th, of course. All right. Let's see how many we can fit in here. All right, let's talk about another formula from your past. Distance. To find the distance, all you have to do is multiply the rate times the time. Like if you're driving a car, the rate would be the speed of the car. The time it takes you to get somewhere, if you multiply these two together, it'll tell you what the distance is. Like if you're at your house and you're saying, well, let me see what my speed is in the car to get to Whittier High School, and then figure out how long it takes you to get there, you can find the distance from your house to Whittier High School. We do use the letters, of course. D is equal to R. Now remember, we don't use that old school time, so we'll put a dot for now. T. For distance equals rate times time. But anyways, notice they have more than two letters. It's two or more letters. Here, two or more. That's why formulas are considered literal equations. So all we're going to do with these examples, I know they might look a little complicated, but if we actually read them, we're not going to be doing much with them. So just so you know, we're just going to do these two. There was issues with the practice problem, so feel free to throw that out. There's a couple issues with it, so we're not going to worry about that practice problem. So we're just down to two things. All right, so it says you deposit $5,000 in an account that earns simple interest. After 6 months, the account earns $162.50 in interest. All right, if you're confused already, hold off. Remember, we just read it. Keep reading. The interest formula is, all right, they're giving me a formula. I is equal to PRT. What formula would you use to find the annual interest rate? So they actually don't even want me to plug in numbers. They just gave me all of this to throw me off. What they're saying, okay, you got this formula. They said find the interest rate. So if you think about it, what letter do you think they're going to use for rate? Yeah, R for rate. And the hint says it right here. You're going to use the interest formula, and you're just going to solve for R. So look, I'm going to write it down. Let me start again. I is equal to PRT. And my goal is to get R by itself. All right, well, think about it. Look, they are right next to each other. That's why I needed you to start seeing patterns in our solving. They are right next to each other. Then I get to put a dot between them. But even the R and the T are right next to each other. Well, then I get to put a dot between them too. And if my goal is to get the R by itself, well, they're multiplying. Then all I have to do is divide. Remember what your goal is. I want to get this letter by itself. So what am I going to write down here? The P, because I want to cross it out. So I'll put it over here and there. Look, it's gone. But you can also get rid of the letter T. Remember, they're all multiplying. So we could also write down the letter T so that it also goes away, but I have to write it over here. And so now if I look at this thing, remember you can't actually divide. That's not a 1, that's an I. Let's put a little lines here. Then that's it, I'm done. Your goal was get R by itself. So if you notice, it says R is equal to I over PT. And that's it, we're done. See, all they wanted us to do was solve a literal equation. That's why know your patterns. Know your patterns so that you remember that they're multiplying and all you have to do is divide. So that brings us to the very last problem of this unit. Example number 3. So in example number 3, let's just read it carefully first, see if they want us to plug in, just see what they want. You own a rectangular lot that is 500 feet deep. All right, so there's the 500 they mentioned. It has an area of 4,000 square feet. So that means this whole space inside, right there, that whole space is 4,000. So that's where I could put it in my picture. That whole space inside is 4,000. To pay for a new water system, you are assessed $20 per foot of the frontage. All right, so of course they're using vocabulary that you may not know or might throw you off. But here's the thing about math. You have to throw something at it. See, they said a rectangle. They also said area. So if they gave you those two ideas, well then look, I'm ready to go. Look, find the frontage of your lot. That's why they gave you the hint and they said, use the area formula. That was the hint in the problem. They said the area of a rectangle. So they're always going to give you clues. Now here they straight out said, all right, use this formula. And I want the frontage. So they said L is 500, W is the frontage. So they want me to get W by itself. Well, the easiest thing for me to do is just plug things in. See, the question is, well, what's your area? That's what formulas are for. 4,000. So there's the 4,000. L, they told you right here, is 500. So there's the 500. And the only thing left is W. So if you look carefully, all they want me to do is find what W is. Well then, again, the patterns for solving. They are right next to each other. I'll put a dot to remind me that they're multiplying. Then I'm going to divide by 500. And I understand, we don't have a calculator. And if you're thinking, yeah, but these numbers are too big, well, keep in mind, look, eyes up for a moment. I'll leave it here so you can write it down after. This one ends in a 0, that one ends in a 0, then throw it out. There's still a 0, and there's still a 0 here. Throw it out. So if you notice, you're really just solving this quick problem. What's 40 divided by 5? And your answer is 8. So the W, the frontage that they're saying, is 8 feet. All right. And finally, the last little question. They said, how much are you assessed? Now, just so you know, how much you are assessed is how much are they charging you? How much are they going to charge you for the new water system? Well, all you have to do is, remember they said you're going to pay, you pay $20 per frontage. And remember, frontage is that W. So then all I'm going to do is take that 20, I'll write it down. Oh, let me get one that works. We'll take that 20, and then I'm going to multiply it by the frontage, the W. Well, we already know what the W was. See, it's up here. We already had W. It's just an 8, so all I'm going to do is multiply by 8. And again, if you're thinking, man, but these numbers are big, this is actually in your word wall, so it's not too big. But just remember, if it has a 0, don't cross it out this time. 8 times 2 is 16, but we have a 0. So then we throw a 0, and look at that. They're going to charge $160 for that new water system. All right, everybody, with that said, that's the end of unit number 1. Don't forget, we do have our very first test coming up next week. So be ready. Make sure all your assignments are in. You only have one assignment today. That way you can get everything done and enjoy your 3-day weekend. With that said, have a wonderful day, everybody.